Welcome to the Integrate and Ignite podcast. I'm your host, Lori Jones. There comes a point in scaling of any business when a tough question gets asked. Should you hire an in-house marketing team or go with an agency? There isn't a right or wrong answer, but here to help you decide which way is best for you is my guest, Cody Gillund, VP of Marketing for Open Lending. Join Cody and me as we walk through the pros and cons of hiring an in-house team versus an agency. We will take a deep dive into what factors should be considered when building a team for marketing, how to get your CEO on board, the marketing rule of 7, and how to get an engaging and productive conversation between sales and marketing, no matter which way you go. Thoughtful and insightful, Cody brings a fresh perspective to this knotty dilemma. Join us today. Welcome to the Integrate and Ignite podcast. Cody, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm so excited to have you back on the show. You've been up to a lot.
I have, yes, and thanks for having me back. This is so fun.
I know, it's fantastic. Tell us a little bit about what you've been up to over the last few years since we last spoke.
Yeah, well, I guess we last spoke when I was at Experian, and during that time, I switched gears to help out with a hospitality startup called In Kind, and now I am VP of Marketing at Open Lending. So super excited to be here. This is a great company. And just, really starting to build their marketing program.
Well, I tell you, it's exciting. And in between all of that, you worked with a startup.
I did.
Tell us a little bit about what you were brought in to do there, which is really, one of the things I love so much about Cody and her experience is that she's done it all. She's worked with very, very large, national brands, building marketing teams, and she's worked with very small brands, building marketing teams there too. And today we're going to talk about, all of that and really what it takes to build a team and outsource a team that can help you achieve your goals.
Yeah, no, super excited to talk about that. I think, whether you're at a startup or at a large company, a lot of sort of the trends of what we're going to talk about are important. Of course, there's nuances in each setting, but I've definitely learned a lot over the past few years. That's for sure.
I tell you, it's always so interesting. I think when in some situations, not all, this is not an unequivocal, but the smaller the brand, you typically just have to roll your sleeves up that much more because the resources are not as great. The revenue is not established or you're beginning to build it, which is really where I want to begin our conversation today. Let's talk about revenue and some of, what is needed ultimately to help a brand establish revenue goals, because quite often, they might have an understanding of what an investment team is expecting, but they really need to put a plan together to make sure that they meet that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, one of the things that I like to say is it's math, not magic. So
I love that.
Expect to, triple your revenue without changing the volume of eyes on your brand. It's as simple as that. And so, in most cases, it's pretty easy to forecast the revenue that you could potentially earn from marketing, even if you're just starting out in your marketing program, using benchmark performance stats, volume expectations, things like that. You can sort of get a baseline around, hey, what is truly possible given the budget that I have and what's just really impossible? What can I just not do? And you can use that kind of information to just start to draw a line in the sand and set expectations for folks who are wondering, what are you going to be able to deliver this year?
And I think quite often we get this question all the time. What should I budget? Right. And a lot of times, I mean, you were the first marketing hire, weren't you, at the brand that you worked at for a while?
I was the first sort of executive leader of the team. I would say in that setting, and then also, in the setting that I'm in now. So it's kind of interesting because, from startup to large company, we're just at the very beginning of starting our marketing program. And so It feels like a startup within a larger company for sure.
Exciting, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And so it's like the same challenges occurred in both places. And I think, again, just going through, making sure that you can kind of put together some kind of forecast to understand, okay, is my currency widgets? Is my currency, leads? What am I trying to deliver here? And then looking at, the volume available in a given media channel, again, benchmarks, performance stats like click-through rate, conversion rate, et cetera. What could I expect if I start to open the floodgates with budget into these channels?
Right.
And you can either tell the team what you need or work with what you have.
Yeah.
Mhm.
There are some rule of thumbs out there. Typically for a startup SaaS company, for instance, they're going to spend a minimum of 10 to 15% of projected revenue on marketing. It could even go higher than that. With a lot of established brands, it could be as low as 3%. Are there any rules of thumb? I mean, you've got to have a starting point, right? And then you can back in the data to ultimately figure out literally week by week what's pulling and how you can scale from there. And the KPIs are very, very important, to continue to evolve along the way as well. But what is your gut? When you get asked that question by the CEOs who hire you, what is your typical response?
If I'm starting a program from scratch, and I'm really trying to sort of prove the worth of the program as a revenue driver and not a cost center, I'll go anywhere from 1% to 3%. I really
Right.
like that 3%. That's usually where you start to actually see some great ROI. But sometimes 3% of revenue is a huge number for an exec team who's not used to having a marketing organization, and
Right.
they need to see some results before they're going to feel really, really great about investing that much in a new organization, essentially. So, right now, that's the approach that we've taken, and
Mm-hmm.
that we're kind of digging into to start, generating leads or driving results for our business, and it's working.
That's
And I think,
good.
yeah, and when you have such a small budget relative to revenue, again, it's so important to be super focused on what levers can you pull to start to drive results, and understand sort of that like time, results, and budget trifecta, and how they're
Right.
all going to work together to do the most you can with what you have.
For those brands who have zero awareness, it's a brand new
Mm-hmm.
brand, and they've got a competitive set that they're truly trying to differentiate. Have you found the need for a larger budget in those situations? And even, I mean, the mix is one thing that we're going to get into next. But what advice do you have for our listeners today who are starting out literally at ground zero?
I think first, really understanding your customer is sort of the first challenge, and understanding everything that makes them tick, what they want to engage with, what interests them, and where they are from a media perspective. Volume and dollars sort of mean nothing if it's not engaging the people that you want to engage. So it's really essential to understand that. And then from there, I think, again, sort of old school marketers are going to remember that marketing rule of seven. Consumers need to see an ad or hear a message 7 times before making a purchase. Today's consumer sees things way more than that. Not only that, but of course they do research, they're engaging in social media, they're reading reviews, they're, listening to storytelling all the time that helps them shape their decisions. So again, just really understanding how to get in those stories and provide content and messages that are interesting to them, that they want to engage with, is going to give you the most bang for your buck.
We researched that number, what is the number today, right? Because it
Yeah.
has changed so much. And our
Mm-hmm.
number now is between 26 and 27 times, especially if you're starting from ground zero, that a brand needs to interact with you, the consumer. The consumer needs to interact with the brand 26 to 27 times to make a buying decision. And if you
Wow.
think about it,
Mm-hmm.
when you are starting at ground zero without awareness, without any preferential mindsets regarding behavior, buyer behavior, it makes sense, right? Especially from the standpoint of us all having in the palm of our hands today control over when we interact with brands. And we even can turn them on and off with settings on our mobile devices and computers and so on and so forth. So it's definitely more difficult today.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think when I think about what I share or what I engage with or what the products that I purchase, it's because I've seen those stories and I've really, 26 or 27 or, 100 times seen that message in a lot of different places. And that repetition is really what's going to get you the volume that's going to lead to more meetings or purchases or whatever the currency is that you're trying to achieve.
Right. Have you seen a change in the need for budget, in the need for, the number of times a brand needs to interact with a buyer based on retail, based on startup, based on B2B tech, all of these different SaaS, all these different industries come into play. And, there's a wide range. In your own experience, what have you seen?
Yes, I think it all comes down to sort of what's your desired cost per acquisition,
Right.
and sort of what's your currency. So if it's a deal that's worth millions of dollars, your CPA may be different than if you're selling a widget. So with that, I think you need to kind of back into what is your desired budget for various activations, and what do you need to invest to get the sale and to warm the algorithm and to start to set the stage for positive
Right.
ROI.
What is the best methodology and how have you developed what the best acquisition cost should be versus can be?
I think it's so different for every industry, for every product or service that's being sold. I think, generally, I want to make sure that I'm not spending more on marketing than I am getting from that particular engagement. And so
Right.
that can be really tough because sometimes, in a B2B setting, it's like, what is an engagement worth? And it all goes back to, again, those touches and sort of is this a critical part in the customer life cycle that's worth that X amount of dollars to get that click, or even if they don't buy
Right.
at that time. I think there's a lot of really great sort of multi-touch attribution tools that I've found help with various agencies and other vendors and partners that can sort of help you understand what that model looks like for you and your business. But it's just so different depending on sort of exactly what you're trying to achieve, what results are you trying to drive, what time you're trying to do it in, and sort of what your budget is.
We have a client with a very, very unique program and campaign in the national marketplace right now. And it's so novel an approach to talent acquisition that there is no impression, KPI, insight information for us to work from. So what we did in this situation to even have somewhat of a starting point to gauge what the cost should be is we took some industry standards, 3 different sets of industry standards regarding talent acquisition, and pulled them together to establish, based on what we'd already achieved, some insight regarding what we should do going forward and what the cost should be. And so there's always that too. There's great industry research out there. And what can you do to pull it in and know that you might need to add a few things together to make it work?
Yeah, absolutely. And it may be sort of a test and learn scenario where you continue to iterate on that formula, because you continue to learn, you continue to understand more about, again, your customer and what's truly driving success for your brand.
Right. Yeah, I think that's great. So let's switch gears. One of the big questions we hear quite often is, okay, when is the right time to build a marketing team? And do I outsource to begin with? Do I hire one marketing lead to do it all internally? What is the magic formula here? And what insight do you have on a very, very broad topic? And then we're going to kind of deep dive into that.
Yeah, for sure. So, I think when I think about building a team, I think about, again, sort of what am I on the hook for? What am I trying to deliver? How much money do I have, and by what time do I need to deliver that? Is there a key date in place by which we need to have shown X results? So with that, I think about, okay, who do I need? What are the disciplines that I truly need to build that amazing team?
Right.
And can I take the time to invest in building that in-house? When you hire folks in-house, you get the benefit of folks who are, very, very close to your business, potentially have more access to data, or technical knowledge. But again, you have that ramp time of really, growing those employees and getting them up to speed on your business. So I found that working with an agency is a great way to spin up, both manpower and resources if you don't have as much time. A lot of times, there's resources like Javelin or Forrester or something like that you could spend, tens of thousands of dollars on in your budget that agencies already have. So you can sort of piggyback on, their resources, but most importantly, of course, is the great human beings that you get to work with when you work with an agency. And I'm currently augmenting our internal resources with an outside agency, and it's really helped us achieve results quickly that we wouldn't have been able to achieve in-house. So it just depends on sort of, again, what's your budget? How much time do you have? And what disciplines do you need? Is this something that you can hire for, or is it something that you need to find right away?
And you brought up a great example of, an entity having the research at their fingertips. Are there areas that you have always said to yourself, okay, I'm going to outsource PR, I'm going to outsource the digital media buying or creative, or what does that magical mix look like for Cody?
Yeah, I have found myself outsourcing PR quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely some creative resources like, potentially development, and such, just because, those are skills like PR, for example. We may not have enough work for an in-house person to do on a full-time basis, but we need PR. So
Right.
That might be a reason to, seek outside agency resources, but also just, one of the things that I've worked with a lot, or the disciplines I've worked with a lot, is thought leadership and content creation. And, it takes a lot of research and, a great copywriter to write a white paper or an ebook that's meaningful to your audience, especially
Right.
in sort of the B2B space. So, being able to work with an agency that has, 5 to 10 folks on hand who are very, very skilled in doing that really helps me go to market a lot faster than if I were to hire all of those folks internally, ramp them up, do the research ourselves, figure out exactly how to sort of cleanse our data to make insights and things like that, which is great practice. It's just sometimes, especially in a startup situation, you may not be able to afford that time investment.
Right. We did a great research study to CMOs about a year ago, and we asked a critical question. We wanted to find out how they valued strategy. And it doesn't matter if you're a startup or if you've got a new product introduction, or if you find that you really need to pivot. Strategy is something that's so important for all marketers and CEOs, quite frankly, to start with. And by the way, listeners, you can go ahead and download that research study, the executive summary, if you go to avocetcommunications.com, and you'll just navigate resources and you'll be able to find that. But nonetheless, what we found in that study is that 20% of CMOs felt that they had strategy tackled, that they had either their own history with strategy, their own techniques of doing it. They did not need to outsource it. The remaining 80% felt that no matter what, they needed to be able to outsource strategy work. And it doesn't matter if it's the communications planning or the strategic messaging, the competitive positioning, whatever it might be. They felt that it was essential that they outsource, because they felt more tacticians, wonderful implementers that they had in-house, but not necessarily the thought process to help the team get there. What is your gut reaction to that?
I see it both ways. I can see sort of a situation, especially if there's like a one-person marketing team where that might be, what can I say something? Sorry, can we edit this part out?
Yes.
I wanted to say, especially if there's, a multiple person marketing team, I can see how that might be the case. Particularly if there, are a lot of folks who are sort of mid-level marketers reporting to a CMO. But I've also seen situations where there are senior people who are trying to grow a program who have the strategy down and just really need help actually with executing the work.
Right.
As I mentioned, sort of, when I talked about creating a white paper or something like that, that just, requires a lot of time investment, writing, skills like that, a CMO may not be able to afford. So
right.
I could see it going both ways. And frankly, the latter is really where I've experienced more recently.
What about the outside perspective that the inside perspective is so important to get to know the product and a little bit more, about the buyer mindset, that sort of stuff. But that I've seen in-house teams hire us because they get stuck and they just need a project with some outside perspective to help them, get over the hurdle that they might be encountering.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen that happen too, in situations, actually like mine, this company that I work for now has been around for 20 years. And we have a lot of amazing legacy folks here that have been with the company for a long time. But it's been really exciting to see sort of, how our agency that's been helping us with thought leadership and content creation has come in and potentially offered some new perspectives that I think sometimes when you're super heads down on a product and a service, sometimes you sort of need that fresh perspective to think about things a little bit differently.
Right.
And collaborate with bring the new ideas and the legacy knowledge together to create something even more amazing.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's a matter of finding that right fit as well. And quite often, based on the stage the company is or based on the internal team, it's not a win out of the chute. Do you recall situations where you gave it your all and you ultimately said, we need to go down a different path?
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
That happens all the time in marketing because you really, again, you just, you never know what's going to really drive people to take the behaviors that you want them to take. You can do a lot of research and you can have a really great guess, but until you get it out in the marketplace and really start to, iterate and optimize, you're not going to know exactly what works and what doesn't.
Right. Now, one thing I love so much about you and the job you do, Cody, is you're not just a really astute marketer, but you're great with creative too. I mean, there are just so many gifts that you provide brands. And so CEOs and CMOs, that C-suite has really relied on you in all of your roles. How have you seen great interaction with the C-suite in relationship to marketing? And how have you seen it not work so well?
I think I've been very lucky in my career to work with some amazing CEOs and C-level talent. I've learned so much from the folks that I've had exposure to throughout my advertising career, Experian, and everywhere I've been since. And so I feel really lucky to have been able to learn from, some amazing talent in our industry. I think, having them engaged in a marketing program really means a lot to me. And, when I get sort of feedback and collaboration, from a CEO, it's like, wow, they're actually paying attention to what I'm doing. They actually value marketing. And that's, again, I think a recipe for great success. Yeah. I think, when there's a CMO at the table, the dynamic can change a bit in that, that person then, should lead the charge when it comes to sort of final decision making on creative and things like that with the CEO's desires in mind. So it can sometimes be an interesting sort of exchange of trust, and I think when that exists at the table, when there's trust and collaboration and feedback, that's when an executive team just soars.
Right. Yeah. It's the organization and their mindset toward marketing is so important. And when you are looking at marketing as a cost structure, that's never a good situation for a marketer to be looking in. I mean, yes, the KPIs need to be there and the ROI needs to be there. But that C-suite, in particular, that CFO position or controller, or whatever it might be, really has a lot to do with the success of it and believing in it. What is your experiencing regarding the CFO in particular and battling for the budget that you need in order to receive the projections he's expecting or she?
I think when a company values marketing, it's going to allow time and resources for marketing to pay off. So I think it's as simple as that. I'm so lucky to be at a company that does value marketing and has given me a chance to drive results, knowing that, when you turn on the throttle, it doesn't always work right away. Actually, right. It usually never works right away.
Yeah, it's test and scale.
Exactly. So, to me, it's those actions that really signal a company culture that values marketing.
It's interesting. This company, Avocet Communications, has worked with over 1,200 brands in our 43-year history. And a lot of them were established brands, multi-state, franchise brands, very, very large footprint in the marketplace. And our specific goal was to drive, direct traction and, people to the retail location. And then a lot of startups too. And without hesitation, a lot of great startups who had great products and really could differentiate from the marketplace, change habits, to develop, a new strategy category that nobody had ever interacted with before. But in most of those situations, the CEOs felt the product was so good that it was going to sell itself. And they learned the very, very hard way and usually came to our agency with their tail between their legs saying, I thought it would sell itself. I mean, that's direct from, the CEO's mouth, by the way, multiple iterations of that. I realized that it won't. I'm now out of money. What do I do? What's your gut reaction to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, from there, it's an opportunity again to reframe that belief and understand that volume is really what's going to get eyes in front of your brand. And just going back to what we talked about before, with the 25 or 26 exposures that you need to actually make a decision or make a purchase. How are you going to get that volume? And you have to invest in marketing to get that volume. You just right. do. And so, the times of sort of guerrilla marketing have passed. And
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I talked about this recently with someone who, quote unquote, wanted a viral campaign to launch their product. And I gave them the example of something that I had read, 5 or 6 years ago about a very, very large international CPG brand who invested $10 million into 10 different viral campaigns, $1 million each, with the hopes that one would stick. And one did, by the way. It turned out to be a great investment, but only companies like that can do that, or you have a lot of luck on your side.
Yeah.
And timing that ultimately helps make that happen.
Absolutely. You just mentioned luck, and again, it's math, not magic. In most cases for marketing, I think there's definitely those success stories that everyone kind of, hears and wants to emulate for their brand. But generally, viral videos that you see, there's a lot of time and thought and production dollars and strategy that have gone into a lot of that, even if it looks like there's not, right? And so there's also a lot of understanding of like what is going to go viral with my customers, because this is what they like, this is what makes them feel good, this is the stories that they want to hear, this is what they engage with. It's definitely not all luck. And I think about a story, have you tried Truss hot sauce?
I haven't.
So I think I had read an article where they actually chose their Instagram handle just because they liked the handle. And then they sort of like tested some different, and keep me honest here, sorry, Truss, if you're listening. But they tested a lot of different products that they could sell at that Instagram handle, and it ended up being the hot sauce. And I think the handle was just at sauce. And so, that's an interesting story around sort of backing into this sort of like viral buzz. I think they're a really popular hot sauce. They sell, it's definitely not a $2 hot sauce. So, there's a lot of sort of trial and error. There's a lot of test and learn. There's a lot of data and performance and optimization that goes into what others perceive to be sort of viral success.
Right. And what we're talking about is brand awareness, right?
Exactly.
And there are quick approaches to brand awareness, of which, 1 out of every 100 work, I would imagine. That's not an unequivocal, but it's very, very low, versus building an integrated mix to brand awareness over time, day over day, week over week, month over month, et cetera, to ultimately get there. What have you found from an integrated mix for the multitude of brands that you've worked on is some good advice for a startup to consider in providing a mix, developing a mix of their own for a go-to-market strategy?
I think, again, just looking at that trifecta of sort of budget and results and figuring out exactly what you need to drive, and figuring out, again, what channels are going to help you get in front of your customer. I think in today's marketplace, you have to do social media. You have to figure out how to be there, whether it's a B2B brand or a B2C brand, LinkedIn versus, TikTok, but they're all relevant. They matter. You need to tell stories there, because that's where folks are and that's where they're going to engage. Email is an interesting platform that I think is still very relevant in a lot of use cases. And then also SMS. I've found a lot of success in SMS in both B2C and B2B marketing in the past 2 years, just because, again, people are always on their phones. And it is a quick, you really have such little time to capture attention. It's a nice channel to use that's very low cost. So, what's most important though is finding that mix of channels where your folks are going to pay attention. And then, the repetition around those channels. I think one of the marketing leaders that I, really learned a lot from used to say, softening the beachfront.
I love it.
Yeah. And, you really have to soften the beachfront, whether you're, again, selling widgets or trying to gather leads. It takes repetition, it takes volume, and it takes a lot of different engagements with your brand.
And that engagement, you've brought this up a couple times, and we're a strategic storytelling agency. I mean, that's what we do is, find stories that are going to, create a positive reaction with an audience. But large brands I see in the marketplace still going at it with what we do versus why it's going to benefit. And it's such a basic, but I constantly find myself reminding brands out there that you're leading with what you do. I mean, that's important, but lead with how it's going to benefit. Go people first, go customer first with this. Of course. That's how you grab them in. So many people, and and companies with marketing departments and companies that have hired agencies are still doing it wrong.
I know. I think that's an interesting challenge. There's lots of really great sort of methodologies now that sales teams can adopt that I think help when it comes to sort of turning it into an instruction on how to approach a conversation versus just like, hey, list your product or services benefits.
Right.
Psychology certainly plays into those kinds of approaches. And, I think they're meaningful and valuable. And that's something, if you are a startup or a company just building out a marketing program, you should collaborate with your sales team to determine what's right for you from a sales methodology standpoint. But yeah, I've seen that too. And I don't think people want to be sort of talked to anymore, whether it's a consumer, ad or a B2B message. People want, again, content and stories that they can really engage with that are meaningful to them, whether it makes them laugh or, it claims to solve a problem for them. That's what's going to make them listen.
Yeah. You'll relate to this with your creative background, but I find too often as well that there's creative for creative sake, right? Like there's something really cool that a creative team wants to get out into the marketplace. And all too often I'll take a look at it. And sometimes even, a litmus test with our own internal team, I'll ask them, what are we selling? So quite often, and this can be a blog, this can be a social media post, it can be anything, right? What is it that we're selling? And that gets lost in the fray quite often. And you take a look at it and it's like, I have no idea. And that to me is always a good question for a team to ask themselves, what are we selling?
Yeah, exactly. What are we selling? I mean, I think, as marketers, we've probably all seen Simon Sinek start with why.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, it's great. And it's really goes back to, again, is it a cream where you're selling youth? Are you selling, a solution to the problem that the chief lending officer can't seem to solve? Are you what are you truly selling? Why do you exist as a company?
Yeah.
And it sort of goes back to sort of the emotional aspect of marketing. I know I said it's not magic, it's math, but of course there is such an emotional part of this business and of what we do that's so important that shouldn't be left out.
And the perfect example there is, Steve Jobs, when he launched the iPod. He didn't launch a technology called iPod. He launched the ability for people to carry 1,500 songs in their hip pocket.
Right.
And that positioning and that juxtaposition of getting to why it's a good product is ultimately, the premise behind Apple and every product that they launch. And listeners, if you've not looked at Simon Sinek's Getting to Why, it's a great video.
Yes.
And we actually use that as a part of our strategy process with our teams, with our clients. That is one of the first things we do, just to really level set the mindset of the importance of customer first, people first, getting to the benefits versus what we do and how we do it. I love it. Cody, we've had such a great conversation today. Any other words of advice or insights for our audience?
Just, keep on doing your forecasts, making sure you're setting your goals, understanding your customer. I think, this has been so much fun. And again, just having conversations like this reminds me of why I love marketing so much. So
that's great. Lori. Well, yeah. You and I both, thank you so much for your appearance on the Integrate and Ignite podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
This episode is complete. Head over to avocetcommunications.com for more ways to scale and grow your business. And be sure to tune in regularly for insights and motivation with host Lori Jones and her guests on the Integrate and Ignite Marketing Podcast.